The Myitsone Dam is now known as this $3.6 billion Chinese finance mega project at the source of the Irrawaddy River in Burma. But it's not a new project. In 2011, widespread protests broke against the planned dam, and the Kachin people in Burma and activists, both environmental and human rights groups, threw their weight behind the campaign. And in a rare occasion, the people forced Myanmar central government to put the project on hold. But 8 years later, China stepped up its efforts to convince the government and the local residents to support it. Now, the Irrawaddy is often described. Uh, the Irrawaddy is often described as the lifeblood of Myanmar, and the Myitsone area is believed to be the birthplace of the Kachin people, the ethnic minority of Burma, after whom the state is named. So now this dam will be built at the upstream Confluence Basin Hydropower Company. This company is a joint venture between the China Power Investment Corporations, as you're seeing in your screen, the Burmese government's Ministry of Electric Power, and the Asia World Company. Now, the CPIC is one of the 5 largest state-owned power producing companies in China. The full contract of this dam, which is signed by the former military government, has never been publicly released. But in an interview, the former deputy minister of Cambodia revealed that 90% of the electricity that this dam would generate will go back to the border of China. So why is this? And this is devastating not only to the people of Kachin, but to the whole of Burma. In fact, in their opposition to the dam, Dr. Zhao, an expert and ally of the Kachin people, said that the dam, which would be the largest in the region, would displace thousands more people, and environmentalists warned that it would flood the area the size of Singapore. It would likely kill the river, and it would have a huge downstream effect that would change the tides of the river and affect the livelihood of millions of fishermen and farmers. So last June, a group of Chinese experts tried to reassure the lawmakers in Kachin Parliament about its environmental impact. But history and numerous independent studies show that the fears of the Kachin people are not unfounded. So the Kachin people fear that flooding and displacement would be uh, just some of the biggest impact of the Myitsone Dam. Their fears are not unfounded because upstream, 11 huge dams are built in China even before the river reaches Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Down the line, there are at least 9 more megadams planned. In Laos alone, there are 63 smaller dams that cut their portion of the Mekong River, and more than half of this were actually built by China. Now, China's two new mega dams in Nam-u are expected to dwarf all this, covering up to 80% of their part of the river. Among other mega dams in Mekong, the Nam-u and Myitsone Dam will be part of the Belt and Road Initiative. This is China's foreign investment policy that is alarmingly stoking land and water grabs in Mekong and elsewhere. Around 60 million people, farmers, fishers, rural peoples, and especially ethnic minorities and indigenous peoples in Southeast Asia rely on the Mekong River as a lifeline. And over the years, it's clear that these dams have changed not only the ecosystem, but the lives of the people here. One of the biggest impacts, of course, is the access to fresh water for drinking. Vietnam alone have experienced droughts that have pushed millions of people to struggle in having constant access to fresh drinking water. The long-term impacts of the big dams across the Mekong River have brought about drought and production disruptions. In the Thai-Lao border alone last year, fishes were exposed on the shoals as the water receded to unexpected levels. You know, China considers the data of the dam, the data of their water management use as part of its strict security. So nobody really knows how much how huge they are controlling the waters up upstream. But recent studies suggest that for 6 months between July and November last year, they have restricted around 20 billion cubic meters of water, which prevented water from entering the lower Mekong, leading to low levels of water in Mekong River. This severely altered the natural flow of the river and pointed to a massive restriction of water in the wet season, when the downstream countries were experiencing weather-driven drought. Under natural flow conditions, a Mekong flood pulse would have been observed. However, restrictions from the upstream neutered that pulse, so they didn't know it was coming. So the operations of the 11 upstream dams that I have said earlier in China have exacerbated the drought conditions in the lower basin by restricting the natural flow. And this is very important because rice production in the Mekong Delta, specifically Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, rely on this cycle of Mekong's ebbing and flowing. And this affects not only the Mekong Delta, but most ASEAN countries such as Indonesia, Philippines, which also import rice from Cambodia and Vietnam. In fact, Vietnam is the fifth largest rice producer in the world. A 2017 study found that this flooding and this restriction of water have provided $8 to $10 billion in annual economic benefits. But it has also cost $70 million in damages. So the benefit of the natural flow clearly outweigh the costs of restricting it by more than 100 times. Another is the depletion of fish stocks. An estimated 2.3 million tons of fish are harvested by fishers, ethnic minorities, and indigenous peoples in Mekong River. In fact, around 20 to 25% of the world's freshwater fish catch in the Mekong River. Last year, until this year, the Tonle Sap Lake, this is the world's largest inland fishery. Now, Cambodians rely on this lake for 70% of their protein intake. Last year, this lake has receded to unprecedented levels, and fishers have reported to have catched 80 to 90% lower than usual. While most of these mega dams are sold to the people in Mekong as poverty reduction and development programs, it has historically played a role in exacerbating poverty of the mostly agricultural nations in Mekong Delta. At least 50%, 49.9% of Cambodians alone face food insecurity, and they rely two-thirds of their protein intake from the Mekong River. Ethnic minorities and indigenous peoples who live near the dams are targeted places of construction are far more at risk in both the economic and the climate related risk these dams impose. So to this end, peoples in Mekong Delta have pressured their governments to shelve their plans of mega dams, which led actually to Cambodia last year to halt its plans for 10 years in the construction of its partner dams in Cambodia. But for Burma, the close ties to China of the Aung San Suu Kyi government and the pressure from the loans that it has taken have swept the appeals and the demands of the Kachin people in Myitsone, and they are now pushing the project through. The Kachin people have been struggling since 1962 for their ancestral lands in Kachin and the recognition of their right to self-determination. As with all the dam projects, this isn't just an encroachment to their food basket and livelihoods, but to their lives, self-determination, and human dignity. So as from People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, Mekong Solidarity, and our member organizations in the Mekong Delta, we urge everyone to please say no to Myitsone Dam in Burma, say no to China's control over Mekong River, and fight for self-determination and liberation of the indigenous peoples and ethnic minorities. Thank you very much.